Hello, Jinesh. Welcome to the Hustle, Heart and Innovation podcast. Thanks very much for coming on. How are you this Friday afternoon?
I'm well, thanks, Brian. Thanks for having me on.
I've been excited about this one for quite a long time. I think it was about 3 or 4 months ago I spoke to your PR to start booking this one in. So delighted to have you on. It's been a long time coming. Let's start with yourself. Tell us a bit about Jinesh, where you grew up. Tell us a bit about your formative years, a bit of your experience. Let the listeners get a feel for who you are as a person.
Yeah, sure. So obviously co-founder and CEO at Sprive, but I grew up in the UK in London. My father came to the UK back in the early 1980s. In terms of my background, grew up in London, studied economics at the University of Warwick, did an internship at Goldman's, was there for about 14 years, then decided to kind of leave that world and start Sprive. And we've been growing the business since.
You were at Goldman for 14 years.
Yeah, 14 years. Yeah, intern, graduate. Yeah,
Oh,
progressing through the
wow.
ranks. Yeah.
So straight into the corporate world and then straight into well, when we get to actually be in, maybe pick up on the sort of exit from corporate to entrepreneurial aspects of it. So obviously we've got you on today to talk about not just Sprive, but, effectively becoming mortgage free. So where did your journey start with becoming mortgage free or having as little in mortgage as possible? Why did this become a passion of yours?
Yeah, so about 13 years ago, my wife and I bought our first house. And I really remember seeing the mortgage offer document and it's saying for every £1 we borrow, we'd pay 50p in interest. And so that meant we'd be paying like over £150,000 in interest over the lifetime of the mortgage. And that's just something that, we just didn't like the look of. So we decided we both had like good jobs. So we thought, like, why don't we go and try to like pay this thing off? And so we went through the journey. Very quickly, we realized that lenders don't necessarily build technology to help homeowners pay off their mortgages faster and save interest. And like really simple things, like I was making overpayments and I had no idea how much interest I was on track to save, how many years I was on track to knock off. There's this element called like early repayment charges, where if you pay too much, then you get hit with penalties. So I ended up kind of tracking all of that through Excel spreadsheets. I remember making mortgage overpayments, and initially my monthly payments started to reduce, and I thought this was great. And then I looked into it further and realized actually you want your monthly payments to stay the same if you want to pay off your mortgage faster and save as much interest as possible. And so, look, I was really fortunate. We were able to like aggressively pay it off in 4 years, saved about £70,000 in interest. So like really like meaningful savings. And it was the only reason why my wife gave me the kind of okay when I told her, look, I've got this crazy idea. I want to leave my comfortable job at Goldman's and start my own business. I think if I still had a mortgage, it would have been like pipe down. You need to carry on doing the corporate job. So it really allowed me to then kind of create that freedom to take a bigger risk in life.
It's interesting that you started that story with the reason you were wanting to get into that space was because of the interest, like that you realized you were going to have to pay, and you ended it with, but your asset secure, so it can, allow you to do other things with your life. And I thought that was quite interesting when doing the research for this, that the primary goal seemed to be pay as little interest as possible rather than pay off my mortgage and have as little of a monthly overhead as possible. But I suppose subliminally they all come together, don't they?
Yeah, I think at the time there was an element of I've always wanted to start my own business. My dad was an entrepreneur, my grandfather was an entrepreneur. So it was always on the cards. And so I felt like if I didn't have a mortgage, then I'd be able to take bigger risks. So that was kind of part of it. But I just don't like paying people money that I've worked really, really hard to earn. And so that never kind of sat right with me. I think my parents taught me don't buy things you can't afford. Obviously, with the mortgage, it's kind of required because property price is just so expensive. So you have to take the mortgage, but if you can get rid of it quickly, and you can afford to do that, then it's obviously very beneficial.
Absolutely. When you say those lessons that you were taught, the first two things that jumped to my mind was, again, doing the research, looks like every homeowner, 20% of their monthly salary goes on their mortgage as a minimum. And then if you think about it, you've already paid your tax. So over half of your gross earnings are effectively straight away going to somebody else, particularly when you've got a high volume of interest rates. So I totally recognize that lesson that you're being taught, and working in financial services as well. I sort of get the context of where you've started there. So you said you managed to get mortgage free within 4 years. So other than the sort of technical components that you mentioned there, of being able to understand what overpayments were and how those really, what, like, how did you manage to make those overpayments? Like, what are the sort of key tips and techniques you use that you would want other people to know about in terms of becoming mortgage free or having as reduced the mortgage as possible?
Yeah, I think the first thing is obviously, it depends on your individual kind of circumstances. Like my situation was very unique. I was at Goldman's, and the salaries you earn there are not like normal salaries. So like what I'll say is obviously my experience, but everyone's got to look at their own finances and see what's right for them. But what we try to do is live off one income. So we live off my wife's income, which is a little bit more modest, and then whatever I earned was kind of plowing that towards the mortgage. And like most lenders will allow you to overpay up to like 10% of your outstanding allowance on a single year. So we initially we were working within those limits, but then when we remortgaged, we then got a mortgage that allowed you unlimited overpayments, so that we could be a lot more aggressive. So I knew that I'd be paying a slightly higher rate for that privilege, but it meant I could really kind of just tackle it and throw money at it. So yeah, my wife thought I was mad when I kind of brought it up that, look, I want to pay it off this aggressively, but she got on board soon,
Yeah,
and
so what, it
we went
wasn't
for
like
it.
let's. I wasn't sure if there was going to be a let's have side hustles, let's have other income streams other than the two primary incomes. Let's have. It really was. Let's focus on it. That yeah, there wasn't anything more scientific, shall I say, than that.
No, it was literally just when income comes through, looking at how much, looking at the income come through and just plowing it into
Yeah,
the mortgage. Like literally, we'd cut back. Like we could have spent that money in lots of different ways. Don't get me wrong, and could have invested it. Could put more money into like things like the pension and things like that. But it was just the decision to just get rid of this thing.
yes, yeah. That was the sort of final question on this section that sort of sprung to my mind was, were there any other costs, and not financial costs, but i.e. experience costs or investment costs or opportunity costs, I suppose is probably another way of looking at it. But sounds like you'd made the decision that the risk reward of those you were happy to take.
Yeah, the way I kind of see it, and it's very different because I work in obviously financial services, and a lot of people around me would be, telling me you should take your money, invest it, and get, higher returns.
Yeah,
But there was like for me, there was a few different things. I think you can, maybe you invest your money and you make 7%. On that 7%, you're going to get taxed. Number one. Number two is you need to like, say over 30 years or 40 years, to get sustained returns at 7% over that time. It's not necessarily guaranteed. You can make good investments, you can make bad investments. With debt, it's relentless.
yeah,
It's something you're going to pay. Lenders calculate interest. It's something you can't really get away from. And then for me, the way I saw it is if I aggressively did it, and I was fortunate, I paid it off when I was at the age of 32. I knew that I had another good 30, maybe 40 years to then build income, build wealth, and then I could invest that and but do that without any of that kind of the mortgage baggage that effectively comes with having something like that. And then I think the other big thing is then like what I've done today, you can take bigger risks that can very much outperform any kind of 7% return or whatever you might get through investments.
yeah. Without that sort of other debt just holding you to,
Yeah,
yeah,
exactly. Because
yeah,
what you find is as you get further on in your life, suddenly you might find yourself have children and you've got a home and you've got other obligations, and it becomes more and more difficult to take bigger risks and kind of chip away at that mortgage. And you never know what can happen later in life. You could fall sick, you could lose your job. I'm in tech, and look at what AI can do now. Imagine what it
yeah,
can do in 5 years' time, in 10 years' time. So, job security is in my view an issue, and so it doesn't matter what you do. So especially with robotics coming into play as well, and commingling that with AI. So for me, it was just having that control was important.
yeah. Understood. So you've got that um, that freedom, if you like, now that you, let's say, your assets secure, your monthly debt obligations are as low as they're going to be for most household owners in the UK. You've got a full-time job at Goldman Sachs. Tell me about the genesis of Sprive.
Yeah, so I mean, when I was at university, I've always wanted to start my own business, and but when you and I kind of told myself, look, I'll start at Goldman's, I'll be there for like 3 4 years, and then I'll build some experience, and then I'll kind of leave and start my own thing. And once you get into an organization like that, you get sucked in, and then you just are chasing kind of the next promotion.
Mm.
And before I knew it, I was there 14 years. It's an amazing organization in terms of the people that and the caliber um, of the individuals that you work with are just top notch. Everyone's super driven. It's a very competitive landscape, but you don't compete with each other. You compete within yourself. They do have like a culture where every year the bottom 10 to 20% get culled. So you literally get a call where someone says, so, we come into this kind of room and then they like essentially tell you, we no longer need your services. Thank goodness that never happened to me. But as I
Yeah.
kind of the longer I stayed, a lot of my kind of friends that I work with either left because they just felt like it wasn't right for them, or they wanted the easier life, or they just literally pushed out. So it's not for everyone because that pressure, for some people, that pressure is too much. But I really enjoyed it. It kept me on my toes and helped me kind of push me to be the best that I could be. It's also got a very like entrepreneurial culture. So it's one where it's very flat structure and they encourage it to think outside the box. They encourage innovation. They try to like do as much as possible without giving you too many kind of capital resources. And so that is a really good foundation for like building kind of that entrepreneurial spirit, and it's put me in good stead once I decided to kind of obviously leave that corporate world and do my own thing.
Yeah. Okay. So Goldman's has given you the opportunity to almost learn how to operate and build a business to high standards, as well as give you what sounds like entrepreneurial license, which is really, really sort of powerful for somebody that's got external ambition. What within all that, tell me when Sprive came into even. So it's not going to be the Sprive that I downloaded today that was 15th on the finance app and the App Store in the UK, right? So to give me this sort of, I'm assuming you're still at Goldman when it starts to come into your mind, but yeah, help me understand the formation.
Yeah, sure. So for me, it really wasn't kind of focused on kind of leaving at that time. But what happened was it was in the summer of 2018, and someone I worked with basically grabbed me one day and was like, "Look, let's go for a drink." And I was like, "Yeah, yeah, let's go. Let's invite the team." And he's like, "No, let's me and you. Let's just." He took me to this pub that effectively was like when no government employee
Ah, right, okay.
typically hangs out. And I was like, "This is strange." And he effectively said, "Look, I'm leaving Goldman Sachs and I want to start my own thing." And I had this crazy idea that we should do something together. And I was like, okay. And to give you some context, like his great grandfather was the king of Hyderabad. So in the 1940s was literally the richest man in the world. So
Wow.
for him, like
Right.
his whole family are entrepreneurs. And so for him, it was always on the cards to like leave this job and start something. And when he asked me, I was like, "So what's the idea?" And he's like, "Well, I don't really have an idea. I just know I want to do something."
Right.
And so that kickstarted a process where every day we would sit at the Goldman cafeteria brainstorming business ideas, our laptops out, and we came up with 5 ideas before Sprive. And it was in November kind of 2018 that we came up with the idea for Sprive. And the way it kind of works, if you're ever trying to come up with a business idea, is you probably find a good idea and then you go, "Oh, this idea is amazing," and then you look into it in a lot more detail, and then you realize actually the idea doesn't have legs, and you kind of bin it. And so we kept doing that until the idea of Sprive popped into my head, partly because obviously my own personal mortgage journey. And then even once we had the idea for Sprive, and that was around November 2018, I spent then another 6 7 months really like kicking the tires and making sure that I had real confidence in kind of building this business, and felt like I could actually build it, and it all made sense because obviously it's a big risk. Like I have a
Yeah.
family, I need to like make sure that I'm not wasting my time and sacrificing something meaningful for something that's just going to be a complete waste of time. And by July 2019, I felt confident that it was worth the risk, and so I yeah handed in my notice and started the company.
But brilliant. I love that story. Even just the visual of you sitting in the canteen with your laptops. It's a really important part of entrepreneurial journey, that, because it allows you to do critical thinking well, doesn't it? So you can discount ideas because of data points or market sentiment or whatever it might be, and actually that's doing that with a peer, a co-founder, or whatever is vitally important. Um, on the journey then from I like the fact that Sprive was a personal and passionate, as well as you've identified a market or a gap in the market as you perceive it, to then you hand in your notice. You say you're confident enough to take the risk. What was the data point or the thing that gave you the reason to believe, right, this is an opportunity rather than a risk? I'm gonna take the chance.
Yeah, so there's lots of different like proof points. So one thing was talking to like homeowners and generally just kind of getting an indication of are we solving a genuine problem? And we got to a stage where we had like 2,000 people on a wait list who said that look, if you build this, we would use it. So that was like there was a lot of like consumer kind of positive sentiment. And then we I started talking to people in the mortgage industry because I'm obviously a complete it's not my space.
Mm-hmm.
And it became super apparent that people in the mortgage industry were very excited about what we're building. So I remember talking to a senior person at a mortgage company. I won't mention the name, and he was effectively like, "Oh, can you come talk to my board?" And a few weeks later, I was at their board meeting, and the CEO was like, "Could we invest £500,000 to help you build Sprive?" And that was like really positive because
Wow. So, but have you got an app prototype or anything at this point, or is it literally idea stage still? With, like you say, tangible data points from consumers and industry professionals to back it up.
no, I literally had a PowerPoint. I think I think it helped that I come from like Goldman Sachs, so I think that kind of gives a bit of gravitas. I don't know if a lot of founders could just and obviously I wasn't a founder, I was just an employee at Goldman still, could just create a PowerPoint and get an offer like that. And I didn't take it, but it was just another proof point that people in the industry, who are experts, thought it was a good idea. And then I started talking to people about how I would actually build the solution because in my head I had an idea of how it should work, but it was really important to be able to like, for example, we support 14 lenders in the UK, and and we don't ask customers for like mortgage information. It's a mortgage app. I had a clear view in my head in that if we were going to build a mortgage app, you can't ask people like to go find their mortgage account number and like how much is left on their mortgage, and like if you start asking people for that information, that they're just so busy and not going to have that information to hand that they wouldn't be able to like use a product. And so for me, it was how do I get those integrations? And so I started having conversations, and I felt very confident on the back of that kind of time period that I could get access to the information electronically that isn't publicly available, which creates a lot of IP, based on the relationships that I had. And then the other things that happened was that I needed like a technology founder. So because like the person I mentioned and myself, none of us can code, and it was like this is a tech business. So I remember coming up with a list of like 10 names of people that I knew in my network that effectively I thought could help me build like be a tech founder or tech partner. And the first person on my list was someone I knew from my time at university. And I put together the PowerPoint, and I put some like research together, and I sent it across and said, look, I've got this idea. I'm thinking about leaving my job at Goldman's. Just want to get your thoughts. Do you want to go for dinner and we just have a chat, and I just appreciate your advice. And the idea and behind this was for me to convince him during that dinner to like essentially help me build this thing. And it was funny. He came at that dinner, and he spent like an hour and a half trying to convince me how he wants to be involved.
Ah, so
And
he was selling to you rather than the other way around.
and I was just like, this is great. Like, I thought it was going to be the other way around, exactly. So that was another proof point where people were willing to like quit their jobs to be involved. So that was like that was like, okay, I'm not crazy. And then I was telling people like around me that knew me that I was thinking about leaving my job at Goldman's, and I was talking about the process of what I was doing, like I mentioned, like talking to investors, talking to people in the mortgage industry, talking to like lenders and whatnot. And people, my friends and family around me were like, "This sounds amazing. Can I invest?"
Hmm.
And before you know it, we had like £240,000 of investment that people wanted to put into the business. And I was thinking, this is crazy. I never asked people for money. I would just literally tell them that this is what I'm doing and this is what I'm thinking about doing. And people would be like, I want to be involved. And so it was like at the end of it, I was like, okay, so I know how to build this. I think I've got in my head that I can build it. And then I know that people in the kind of the industry think it's a good idea. I can convince people to leave their jobs. So that like people are thinking it's a good idea and it's worth the risk, and I can get money and all these different proof points. And then the final thing for me was like the financial model. So I sat down and put together a detailed financial model and said, look, on paper, is this business viable business? Is it going to make money? So things like how much is it going to cost to build the app? How are we going to make money? What, and on paper, if something doesn't make sense, then there's no point doing it. And when you go through that kind of exercise of creating a financial model, you learn a lot. And it kind of helps you form your strategy in terms of how you're going to build and how you're going to enter the market. And so once I did all that and I felt good about it, yeah, long story short, I quit my job.
You can see the robustness of your sort of upbringing through Goldman as you're speaking there. That's every base covered like acutely, which is great. Which you need a different skill for all of those things. I've got a few questions based on everything you said, but I think just at this point, do you want to explain what Sprive is at the moment? Because so that we're not sort of weaving back and forward and people understand exactly what the app is today, what it empowers, how many people it empowers, so that when we piece through the questions I've got that bring us up to today, we've got the the footprint of what it is in our minds.
Yeah, sure. So like you fast forward now, we have 150,000 homeowners in the last 30 days that have effectively used the app. And the best way that I describe it is it's a mortgage management app. It helps homeowners pay off their mortgages faster and save interest, but without kind of impacting your lifestyle. And we do that in kind of three core ways. So the first reason to kind of join Sprive is on the marketing slogan behind it is shop away your mortgage. So every time you do your everyday shopping through the app, you earn cash back, which goes towards your mortgage with just one tap. So effectively, you turn your everyday shopping into a mortgage overpayment. So if you think about the average person, they tend to spend a lot of what they earn. So whether it's your grocery shopping, your cup of coffee, your takeaway, your car insurance, you get cash back on the back of it. And yeah, and typically putting cash back towards your mortgage means that you can earn about three times the amount of cash back in terms of mortgage savings because you don't pay interest on
Yeah.
that capital payment. So it becomes very, very impactful. And then we have another feature where you can put spare cash towards your mortgage, like an auto saving feature where you link your current account. And then if you like, we can set aside spare cash. And with one tap, you can make payments to your lender. And those two features alone help our customers on track to save collectively over 150 million pounds in interest. So
Wow.
pretty impactful. Like I saw someone on social media a few days ago posting that they're on track to save 84,000 pounds in interest
Wow.
and knock 14 years off their mortgage. There's not many apps that can have that much of an impact on someone's life, which is really nice. And then the third feature that we have is we scan the market every day for better mortgage deals. If it can help you find a better mortgage deal, will essentially help you get it. So yeah, think of us like a holistic mortgage management app, but the goal is helping you pay off your mortgage sooner.
That's you know, transformational sell and some of the things that I had written at the start in terms about the stats of the debt that mortgage holders are holding in the UK and how it sort of contains our lifestyle. I mean, you must be pretty proud of the impact that's having, even at this stage.
Yeah, we're still.
Which isn't what I was going to ask. But as you said, as you talked it through, I got inspired. So I feel like I
Yeah,
have
yeah,
to say
yeah. I
that.
mean, it's still, I still think we're very early in our journey. I think it's 11 million homeowners in the UK, and there's some really scary stats. I think it's something like 3 million people will have a mortgage past the age of retirement.
Yeah,
So like,
just under 40% of mortgage owners I picked up will have it past the age of retirement, which is scary.
yeah, and like imagine in your 70s and you're still having to worry about a mortgage.
Mm.
Lenders are now allowing people to borrow up to the age of 80. And what's happening in the UK is by the time people can get on the property ladder, it's very common for them to be in their kind of mid 30s or kind of early 40s. And because property prices have been rising quite significantly compared to salaries, people borrow more for longer. It's the only way they can afford the monthly payments. Like my example, I gave you like 13 years ago, I bought my first house. Over that time period, my property value is like doubled in
Yeah,
value. I promise people salaries haven't, doubled. So it's really difficult. And then we also had interest rates skyrocket. So in my example, when I took out a mortgage, interest rates were practically zero. Now, they've kind of skyrocketed. I think when I start to look at like customers and what they're paying, some customers are paying for every pound you borrow, £3 in interest. So if you're borrowing like £150,000, I mean, it's eye-watering the amount of interest
yeah,
that people are paying. So the fact that we can help, because I come from a financial services background, Brian, and what I find is that most financial organizations are getting people more into debt, and that's how they make their money. There's not many companies whose mission is to get people out of debt. And so it's nice to be able to like help, and some of like the customer stories that we that I hear in terms of the value adding is just super nice.
yeah. And it's actually a social issue as well, rather than just an economic or a individual issue. Where once you put the impact across that big a pool of people, that's probably a different podcast, though, to be honest. So that so now we know sort of where they at has its three key value points, as you sort of call them, or three products. Just want to bring you back to the early stage. So one of the things I thought earlier was this does seem like a fintech product to me. So like a technology solution that would need to be designed with the right architectural principles, etc. You've already covered, you identified that as a weakness of yours, and then therefore found a co-founder. Uh, he sold himself to you, or that individual sold himself to you in the, you know, that meeting you described to us. How have you found being sort of founder stroke co-owner with where the value play in this product is not being within your perfect skill set? Have you found that challenging? Have you enjoyed using other people's skills? Have you upskilled massively in that area? And help me understand that sort of understanding the technology suite and how that's made you feel.
Yeah, so in my career at Goldman's, I always used like other people around me that were like highly skilled in the technology space, and then use my business knowledge to build and solve products and problems for Goldman Sachs. So whilst I can't code, I'm very comfortable with like writing like business requirements and holding engineers accountable. So I had that skill set. I just couldn't build the actual platform. I'm a big believer when you start a business, and I do sometimes in my journey. Obviously, I've met many entrepreneurs, many founders, and solo founders. I don't know how they do it, because I think if I did this alone, I think I'd be truly crushed and probably wouldn't have got to where we've got to. I think having the right people around you is just so important, and having that kind of self-awareness of where your strengths lie and where they don't, and how you can bring people in that kind of kind of bridge the gap. And for myself, my strengths are a little bit more on things like fundraising, compliance on the regulatory space, on the finance space, and going on podcasts and going on TV, and getting kind of the brand and the mission out there, and I'm very kind of close to like the marketing side of the kind of the business. And then the other two founders, so the one who grabbed me, that worked at Goldman Sachs, and the one I mentioned, when we went to dinner together, that they kind of more technical, and they run the business. So it's quite nice. The way I kind of see it is those two kind of run the day to day, and then I try to grow the business.
Yeah, brilliant. Um, the other thing I was thinking as you were talking about that early stage, you mentioned that you didn't want homeowners to go and look up their mortgage details and have to, share that with the app or whatever the retrieval process would need to be there. And actually, I had written down the barrier to entry here for me is friction. So exactly what you started to describe. Customers have too many data points, too many banks, too many different apps that then therefore mean by the time that they've got to, do what your ask is, they just kind of close the app. But you sounds like you had that design principle from the jump. How from idea, you've had these first few conversations to then developing product to market. What was the testing process like to make sure those design principles held and were going to be the right design principles? And did you have to pivot any design principles on the way?
Yeah, so we did. So there was a bit of a debate. So when we first kind of left Goldman's and we started to like design the product, and we didn't have any in-house product design at the time. It was literally like my co-founder and myself just coming up with sketches and trying to like build out what we thought was the right product. And I had a very clear idea on what I thought the app should be. And my co-founder read a lot of like startup books, and it was all about MVP, and he wanted something a lot more basic. And then my general view was that people aren't like, because of the point that you make, friction, causes inertia. Doesn't matter how motivated someone is to like become mortgage free. People are human, and if you make it difficult, they're busy, they'll just give up. But I kind of backed down and I listened to my co-founder when we created this MVP. And what we found it took us 9 months. So you talk about MVP, but actually it took us 9 months of like money and time to build this. And when we launched, no one really wanted it, because there's too much friction there. What was good about it is that we used it as an app to test and learn. So from that perspective, it was good, but we wasted a lot of time and we wasted some money. And then we built the version of the product that I had in my head. And at the time, there was no shopping; it was just spare cash. So it was this feature where you put spare cash towards your
Yeah, okay.
mortgage.
So just one of those three features, basically, that you mentioned.
Exactly, yeah. And this was when interest rates were still very low. And so in my head, like most people like were earning very little in their savings. So to get a better return, pay it towards your mortgage just was a thing that was kind of sensible if you didn't want to invest your money. And on the first day that we launched, and that was post COVID, so we had COVID to deal with. So once COVID ended, we were like, okay, let's launch. We had on the first day 2,000 people download the app, and I was like, okay, this is great. And then interest rates started to like rise really aggressively, and I realized then customers were starting to say, look, I don't have spare cash. Like just being able to get through day to day, cost of living, rates rising, um, means that even a few pounds a day or whatever it might be through spare cash isn't going to happen. And people, I saw an early trend that people were like starting to close accounts. Not everyone, but like the people that were maybe less affluent. And so they got me thinking, like, how do we make the product? Because my goal was to help every homeowner in the UK. And so I came up with the idea of this kind of shop away your mortgage. And then again, trying to build that took time, trying to convince big brands like Amazon and the seven national grocers. It's not something you can just turn up and make happen and do the integrations. And so it took me about a year and a half to make that happen. And then we launched it. And then again, you iterate on the product. And initially, still customers' first reason to come was to put spare cash. And the shopping was the side feature. And then I realized the side feature was probably worth being the main feature, and so then I swapped things around, and
Were you
then
seeing were you seeing people convert to the reason they came was the spare cash, the reason they stayed was the shop away your mortgage? Is that
yeah, it was that plus also the shopping made us money. The spare cash, the
okay?
spare cash didn't make us money. It was a product that customers liked, but if you're especially the macro, there was a time where investors just really wanted to grow at all costs, and so having a big customer base mattered more than actually making money off the customer. It was always like if you have the customer, then you'll work out a way to make money. That was kind of the kind of the investor mindset. But then kind of the paradigm shifted, and then it was all about unit economics and actually making sure that every customer made you money. And that shift came, and we shifted accordingly. And now we're in a position where every customer on Sprive makes us money, which is nice.
Yeah, brilliant. So that is like a business model shift as well as a customer, you know, what's the word I'm looking for? The product model shift, if you like, as well. What was that the only one you tested? Shop Away Your Mortgage, or did you shop other? Did you test any other? Because as you're talking, the light bulb started going of, you know, if you're wanting to help every mortgage customer, what does every mortgage customer do? Well, they spend money every day and every month. So I can see why you went there. Was there anything else you tested, or
Yeah,
was it in that space?
we tested one more feature, which was surveys. So you can complete surveys, and when you complete a survey, you get money towards your mortgage. And it was very popular in that we had like 100,000 surveys completed during the kind of the test that we did. But what we found is the survey industry isn't very reliable. So sometimes
Yeah,
you'll complete surveys and then they don't pay, or they give you surveys that you're not eligible for, or there's too much demand. So people want surveys, but there's not enough surveys to like provide people. So every time someone goes in and looks for a survey, they see nothing. So it was just not enough money in it, and it started giving us like bad reviews, and
yeah,
so
okay,
we just ditched the feature and threw it and threw
yeah.
and
Failed fast for, as they say on
yeah,
that one.
exactly,
Yeah,
exactly. Put
which is
it in
good.
and then kind of took it out.
Last one on Sprive then, because I can't believe the time and I've got loads to ask you about raising capital. The so we've obviously got though that customer base that you mentioned that are you've got 150,000 in the last 30 days. You've got those three aspects. In terms of making money, is it through the brands? Do you get cash back from the brands every time a customer transacts? And assuming it is, what's the process like of acquiring brands?
Yeah, so we make money like not a normal cashback company. Like there's big ones. Your listeners might be familiar with Top Cashback and
Yeah,
Quidco. So it's a very established industry. So yeah, we get paid by the brands, and then when someone remortgages through our app, we get paid by the lenders. Very similar to like a mortgage broker, a mortgage advisor. In terms of getting the brands, some brands are easier than others. So some brands are just very much like we will do cashback, and we'll do that with anyone that can effectively, convince people to use cashback products. And then there's some apps are and brands that are very sensitive around being able to like work and do cashback, and you need to be able to justify the ROI, the return on investment. And those brands take obviously longer. So supermarkets and like the likes of
yeah,
Amazon take a lot longer. They're just not you can't just be like, hi, I'm an app. Let's work together. That takes time and energy.
yeah. A bit more of a tail there, but that's part of the process, I suppose. That's interesting. So, in terms of capping off the mortgage section and the Sprive section, if you are listening on Spotify or YouTube, why don't you drop us a comment? Let us know what you think of Jinesh's fantastic product he's built and the way that we've discussed that at the moment. What I have to say is when I downloaded the app, I couldn't believe the lack of information I had to input, which was quite liberating actually. So the design principle you said at the start, I've definitely noticed as I've become a user. On to raising capital. So absolutely fantastically, you have the sort of the premier outcome of actually being successful on Dragon's Den recently, which was a brilliant episode in itself. However, tell me about raising investment. What stage did you think you would need an investor? Dragon's Den wasn't the first investment you ever got. Do you want to sort of help us understand why you would raise investment at what stage, and then also valuations, how you know how much to ask for? I think all these three aspects are fascinating.
Yeah, so because of mine's a technology business and it's in financial services, it's impossible to essentially build, Sprive without capital investment unless I didn't have like millions in the bank. So I think I mentioned at the early days, people were essentially asking me like, can I get involved? Can I invest? And it was very much my first round was like a friends and family round. So it was people that knew me, either that I worked with or gone to university with, or were family. And the same thing applied to like my co-founders. We effectively set ourselves a target that we would try to bring in like say £80,000 each through our own kind of network, and we were able to do that quite comfortably. And I find with every round, there's always a bit of FOMO that sometimes you need to create. So I remember through my co-founder's network, he got introduced to the former CFO of Microsoft, US and India, and I spoke to him about the business, and he's like, "Oh, I quite like the idea. I think I'll invest." But he never like 100% confirmed, but he showed a lot of interest. So then I went around everyone saying, "Look, the CFO of Microsoft
Mm,
US and India is going
brilliant.
to invest," and everyone was like, "Well, if he's going to invest, then I'm definitely going to invest." And then we pretty much got all the money, and then I went back to him and said, "Look, everyone else is in. Are you in, or are you out?" And he was like, "No, no, I'm in." And so that kind of we got the kind of the full circle, and we're able to kind of get our first kind of piece of capital. And at that point, like I said, PowerPoint and valuation is completely arbitrary. You put a number out there, and you see people buy it. You look at like people who are building similar things and seeing what valuation they went for, and you get a kind of sense of the market. But it's not based on anything like of real substance. It's just a number, and if people agree to that valuation, then you're good. If people start to say it's too high, then you may need to drop it down. If it's so you're just gonna have kind of. But the more research you do, the more people you talk to that are knowledgeable about the kind of place you're operating in, the more informed you are. So you know that you've got a good number to kind of start with. The second time I raised was when we launched the app, and I knew that we had on the first day like 2,000 people download the app, and so you're pre-revenue, you're not made any money, but you can instantly show like boom, like in the first few days, like how many people download the app, like we're going to be the next big thing, and on the back of that, you then go out and use that momentum to then go and raise some more money. And this time I went with something called angel investors. So these are like professional investors who invest in businesses. There's a concept in the UK called SEIS, and later on is EIS, where you get like a tax rebate on your investment. So you invest £10,000, you get 5,000 back that you can write off against your tax. And so you get a lot of angel investors in the UK that are willing to like take a risk and again put a PowerPoint together, put a financial model, and you have meetings. And I found it was a time where
Did you
interest
do
rates.
that through like an angel company or was it individual?
No, myself, I,
Yeah,
I
yeah.
I posted on LinkedIn every day, and that helped in terms of like people. I did that throughout the entire journey when I was building. So people kind of got to know me and kind of saw what I was doing. I went on accelerator programs, so where then there would be angel investors that you pitch at, and that was helpful. I would go on podcasts, and then some people like wealth podcasts, and people would hear me talk about building Sprive. Sorry, oh, I thought
So
I was on silent. I'll do that again. Let me put it on silent first. Sorry, I'm trying to make you do more editing than you should. Uh, so then I went on podcasts and like investment podcasts, and suddenly people were reaching out saying, "I heard you on the podcast. How can I invest?" And that was nice. And when you get angel investors, they typically come with friends,
yeah.
so that they like to invest in groups, so that they don't feel like they want to get kind of
Yeah, they feel
consensus.
like they diversify together, don't they?
Yeah,
Yeah.
if they're
Mhm.
gonna if they're gonna
Mhm.
if they're gonna lose money, they're gonna lose money together,
Mhm.
kind of thing. And so yeah, I kept doing that, and then I'll be like, when they invest, I'll be like, so who else do you know? And then they would keep, recommending people, also people in the industry that I would talk to, and they would say, oh, can I invest, etc. So yeah, just kind of built that up, and at that time, because interest rates were quite low, there was a lot of appetite for people to like try to make money and get better returns, and so it was an easier time, I'd say, to raise.
How much
And
were you raising in that round?
so it was supposed to be 1.2 million we ended up being oversubscribed. We ended up kind of closing 1.45 million.
Right.
And again, the valuation is very arbitrary. There's no like science to it. It's just getting a feel. What we did have is an institutional investor that gave us an indicative offer at a certain valuation. So that was helpful.
Yeah. Okay.
And again, a little bit of FOMO because then when you get an institutional investor or the angel investors are like, well, if they've done their due diligence and they think it's a good idea, then we wanna get involved. And actually, I didn't take the institutional investment in the end. I just went with the angel investors just because I just felt like that was the right thing to do at the time. And then I raised just before Dragon's Den, before I went on the show, kind of closed. That was 2.5 million in cash, and I also did some like TV media for equity, which is where you get the ability to kind of do TV advertising in return for equity with Channel 4 Ventures, and that was yeah with institutional investors. So that was a different caliber of investors, so less individuals, but more people who do this, VCs who do this for a living.
Did you notice a difference in the asks and the communication styles and everything across those 3 rounds? Not just because and originally it's your friends and family, but naturally when people are investing more money with that, obviously that's more risk. So therefore there's more due diligence aspects, as you call it. Did you notice like a real change and shift in attitude towards the product, i.e. this feels like this is going to be not just let's invest and see if it works, so that this is something we can get return on?
Yeah, I think there's an element of like proof points. So the more further along you are, the more proof points you have, and therefore it becomes less risky. And so institutional investors are looking for much more traction and comfort. But it was still very challenging. I'm not going to like pretend, because there's a lot of mortgage technology companies that have failed, and there's a lot of consumer personal finance apps that have failed over the
Yeah.
last 5 years. It's a bit of a graveyard. So a lot of institutional investors are quite nervous about investing in a space where so many people have failed, and so many people that they may have invested that they thought were brilliant entrepreneurs, brilliant founders, and then weren't able to like make it work, and they've lost money. So it wasn't easy. But it's I've never been so like rejected, Brian, in all my life when I was raising that last round. But through kind of sheer determination, I was able to like get the round done. But the level of rigor is a lot more than I'd say individuals, because they're obviously investing a lot more money and they do this for a living. So for sure, it's more intense and more
So
difficult.
that's over those 3 rounds. That's the best part of £4 million that you've raised, which is an absolutely incredible feat in itself. Why Dragons Den? What do you need from them? And one of the reasons I say that is when I watched it, I thought you were going to ask for like 500 grand or £1 million or something, and you didn't.
No, I didn't, because I'd already raised, so I didn't really need the cash, and I kind of made that quite clear to the Dragons that the way I kind of saw it is that you can get advisors and people who are bring a lot more than just money, and that's how I saw it. That if I needed to put an amount, so I wanted to keep it small so that it felt like it was a no brainer, because
Yeah.
if there was no need for me to ask for a lot of money, because I just raised some capital. But I wanted them, ideally to be involved and use their kind of their brand and their network to be able to like help take Sprive to the next level. And so in my head, it was more like as if I was giving someone like an equity for being an NED or,
Yeah.
or an
Yeah.
advisor. That's how I saw it.
That's exactly how I saw it by the end. It was like consult for equity type.
Yeah.
Yeah, brilliant. So you obviously were successful, right? But I'm assuming, the process, is it as intimidating as it sounds? Was it more intimidating than some of the other investors you'd went to? You said you'd been rejected already. Like, you've got a grin on your face, which tells me there's a story to tell here.
I mean, I was obviously battle hardened because
Yeah.
I spent a year raising capital, and I think if you go into the den and you need the investment, so I see some like I've watched the show in the past, and you can tell that the founder is like really important. This is gonna be
Make or break.
in their minds make or break. Then you're adding so much more pressure to yourselves, and with the cameras and then the five dragons, and it's not there's no retakes. it's one take, and if you make a mistake, you know they're gonna put it in the final edit because it's just good television, and it becomes a lot harder. I felt very confident, A, because I didn't need the money, and B, I had spent so much time being hammered in terms of questions about my business that I knew it inside out. So I felt very confident in the Q&A part. In the actual pitch, so the way it works is the first like minute, 2 minutes is you talk about your business, and that's something you have complete control over because you effectively can memorize what you're going to say. And I'd got my kids involved like the weekend before I was going into the studio. I literally told them, look, while I'm doing my practicing my pitch, like scream at me, jump at me, push me around, like try to be as annoying as you can, because I felt like if I could do it with all that craziness around me, then I'd have no issues kind of recalling the pitch when I was in that kind of more stressful situation. And yeah, I actually really enjoyed it. I was in the den talking to the dragons for about an hour and a half, and then the final edit is literally like 15 minutes. So and obviously a lot of the conversation that we had didn't actually make the final cut, and I have no idea when it goes live. I see it at the same time as everyone else is watching the show. So it can be intimidating, but I actually found it fine.
Yeah, like you said, you were battle hardened. You've done a lot of prep and practice. The See, in terms of, you said you knew the business insights out, so the Q&A bit you felt quite comfortable on. Did you have an idea what you thought they would like live and die over in terms of the key data points they would want to know, or that you would have to upsell, or could you anticipate any of those types of aspects?
Yeah, so I knew that they would hit me on like the loss
Yeah,
because I'm a tech business. So like I think the first year we lost like 500,000. So I knew that straight away they'd be like, because I've seen it on other episodes where if you lose, it make big losses. It makes good television. It's like, wow, you've lost 500,000. Like what are you doing? In reality, like any technology company that's in financial services, that's very, very common. But I knew that I would get kind of hit hard on that side of things, and then the cost to acquire a customer. I
mm,
felt like that would be an area that they would focus on because, like I said, if they're knowledgeable about the market, they would be aware that there's been a lot of uh, personal finance apps, as an example, that have tried to like grow businesses, and the biggest challenge has been and how do you acquire customers in a very cost effective manner. So those are the kind of areas that I thought they would grill upon, and they did. What I did learn very quickly, and it comes out in the edit. If anyone hasn't seen it and then decides that they want to see it, my episode aired on the 5th of February 2026, just in case you're trying to look for the episode. It was episode 2. But like the first question, like Deborah Meadon asked me, she asked me something about layering,
yeah,
and I'd never heard of the word, like the term layering. So in a normal like investor conversation, you'd simply say, I don't really understand the question. What do you mean by layering? But on Dragon's Den, you can't do that because it'll just come out wrong in the edit. So you take a punt on what you think they mean. And then obviously she clarified that situation. But immediately as a viewer watching, it looks like okay, he doesn't really know what he's talking about. And then the second question, again, I think Stephen Bartlett asked me, that came in the edit, was around like that
yeah,
point that I made around acquiring customers. And so again, the way I would answer that question normally is I'd give them context. So I'd say, look, most of our acquisition is through word of mouth. It's just friends and family, and that comes for free, as an example. And then I go through, we just recently started like paid ads, and so we're really early doors. We only started that, like we've been doing that and I do a bit more storytelling and provide context. And Stephen Bartlett straight away like cut me off and was like, "You're not answering the question."
yeah.
And so then I very quickly realized that I can't really, I've got to adjust the way I answer these questions because I need to be a bit more direct. And that was something I had to learn quite quickly on my
On the spot.
on the spot. Yeah.
It's interesting because he obviously knows that market maybe a wee bit more than the others, and or certainly that was my perception beforehand. So I was surprised how quickly he got to the conclusion he did, but he obviously he picked up the key data points you've mentioned there in terms of loss making and like customer acquisition costs. You remained what seemed very calm the whole way through. Did it feel like that to you? So you said you had to think on your spot and adapt quickly. That in itself is a big skill. Did you feel like that at the time, or did the heartbeat get raised, or what? What was your emotional state
So
like?
I think as a founder, sometimes you're a bit delusional. So in my head, I was like, I just raised 2.5 million from some really good investors. My business is strong, and
Yeah.
I've watched Dragon's Den in the past, and there's some businesses that get investment that in my mind I was like they haven't done the traction that I had. So in my head I was like there was no way that I was walking out of that den without an investment, and I had the mindset that I wanted all five. So when two kind of fell away quite quickly, I was like in my head, I remember going, this isn't going as well as I thought it would. But I kept just pushing, and every question they asked, I kept like kind of hitting back. And I think the turning point was when like Peter Jones started asking questions. So Peter Jones knows my business the best because he actually invests in a lot of like fintechs
Right. Okay. I never knew that.
he's on the board of Howdens as an example, which is a big financial service insurance broker, and they have an investment in a company called SPF, which is a big mortgage intermediary. So he knew my business, and so he asked like really good questions.
Yeah.
And once he started asking questions, it became really clear to the other dragons that okay, this business is very exciting and it's got like huge amount of potential and legs. I think at the end of it, I'm not just saying that. I think all five would have invested once
Yeah.
they had the chance to like answer all the questions that that they had. And I think Gary Neville even made a comment at the end saying, "I think we're a bit naive,
Yeah, he did. Yeah,
not investing
which
as
is
much."
which was brilliant, and actually I thought was the best bit of feedback you could get through the whole thing. So
Yeah,
that is cool. I've never seen dragons almost counter offering each other before. You quite often get the. In fact, do you want to tell what happened at the end rather than that?
yeah. So, and actually, the full story we didn't actually make the final edit, so I can give
Right.
you a bit more context. So, I went in for 50,000 for 2%, and it got countered offered. I think the counter offer was from Peter Jones was 50,000 for 5%, and then Tuka wanted to do the same deal, and they said I'd kind of share with Peter. And in my head, I was a little bit like, okay, that's I have 2.5 million in the bank. So giving me a valuation of like how much money I have in the bank is, as a if I was really gonna like care about it, then I would like really like push hard on that.
Yep.
But
Mhm.
like I said, for me it was more on the I saw it as more like an advisory thing. So I didn't want to push too hard. And Deborah Meadon effectively said, "Well, I'll do 50,000 at four." So I was like, "Okay, that's good." So then I went back to Peter Jones and Tuco and said, "Well, you're gonna match Deborah." And Peter Jones, the way he phrased it, I don't know if you noticed this, but he said, if I drop, is the deal done?" So he phrased it in a way that kind of pushed me to say yes, because if I'd said no, I'm going to go back to Deborah, then he might have not actually agreed to the
Yeah. Yeah.
and he might have just got annoyed and
It
actually
was
just
brilliant
backed
negotiation
out.
from him, wasn't it?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So
Mhm.
so I went to Deborah and really politely I said, look, two dragons are better than one. So I said, yeah. So I kind of addressed that. I didn't dismiss her. I recognized and showed her respect. Look, this is the way he's phrased it, and so that's why she didn't get too upset. And then she came back saying, well, you could have asked me whether I'm willing to like, and what she actually did was do 50,000 for 3%. And then I actually went back to Tuka and Peter Jones and said, look, would you do 50 for three? And then I was trying to get all three dragons for that, and he was like, "No, it's not enough skin in the game for us." And Tuka's like, "I don't get out of bed for like less than
Yeah. Yeah.
less than more than 1%." And so I just kind of said, "Fine, let's just do all three for 50,000 for 5%." So
Yeah.
I get one, less like less than 1.5% per per dragon or like something like that. It's pretty. I thought that was pretty okay.
Yeah, but all the knowledge, experience, contacts, and everything that they've got comes with it. So
Exactly, and the
superb.
firepower that comes with it. Yeah,
Yeah,
I think it was
yeah.
fine. Yeah.
Um, we've run out of time. I've not finished asking you questions. I told you this would happen, so apologies about that. But thanks very much for coming on. Um, I've got lots of reflections that I'll definitely need to sort of ponder back around on. Is there anything we've not touched on that you would like the listeners to know or hear about And then lastly, just where people to either follow you or find, best place to find you or the app.
Yeah, so in terms of myself, if you want to connect, and happy to do that, just go to, find my name, Jinesh Vohra on LinkedIn, and we can connect there. In terms of if you have a mortgage and you're one of hopefully the 14 lenders that we effectively support, it's a free app. Give it a go. Head to the app store, and yeah, hopefully we can help you kind of save money on your mortgage and pay less interest. And if you need more information, go to our website, sprive.com.
Brilliant. Thanks a lot, Jinesh. Really, really appreciate your time and your story. And I think you're a very skilled marketer, which we haven't covered in this episode at all. So thanks a lot for your time, your knowledge, and I wish you all the very best with the product and the business.
No, thanks, Brian, for having me on.